What's up, everybody? Happy New Year. Hope you all had an awesome Christmas. I didn't mean to be down for this long, but hey, there you go. It happened. I'll spare you all the boring reasons why and just get into my first review of 2023, even though this is actually a late review for a movie that came out in 2022. And the movie I'm referring to is one that seems to be a bit of a hot potato at the moment. It's the film Soft and Quiet, directed by Beth de Araújo. Um, Chinese, Brazilian, American filmmaker, and I apologize to any Brazilians out there if I butchered that surname. At least I think that's what that is. And from what I can tell on IMDb, she's previously just directed some short films, but she announces herself in a big way with this feature debut. And based on this movie, I'd say that Beth is packing an abundance of talent. Not the least of which is working with actors effectively, but we'll get into that in a minute. I don't want to go getting ahead of myself. Fair warning, this movie, I think, probably unsettled me more than any other movie did all year. It's not a question of ranking it per se. This isn't a matter of it being either, better or worse or more or less scary than anything else I saw all year. It's just that in terms of having physically bad ill feelings in my stomach, like serious stomach knots the whole time I was watching something, the experience of this movie produced the most knots I had in my stomach all year by a mile. And the reason for that is because it takes a look at a transgressive and toxic vein of our society that essentially is existing in plain sight. But because it comes off so unassuming and innocuous to most people's eyes, it's able to infiltrate our society in a manner that, as the title suggests, is very soft and quiet. And that's exactly what makes it such a dangerous movement. Now, this is a movie that is virtually impossible to talk about without spoilers, and it's furthermore a movie that I would recommend that you go into blank to get the most out of the experience. So if you know for a fact that you're not easily offended and you're curious about a movie that's challenging, hit pause right now and go check this one out. And then I'll at least just give my vague thoughts on how I felt about the film as a whole, just to give some of you a bit more of an idea in case you're still on the fence. And then I'll be diving into the movie full bore with spoilers. And doing my best to be vague and careful with what I divulge here, I'm just going to say with fair warning that the movie does involve fairly frank depictions of racist rhetoric and ideology. It's all used fairly to tell the story that's at play here, and in fact, the movie is essentially an in-your-face critique of that particular mentality. But if the idea of spending a couple hours of your time with people who think and behave that way doesn't exactly sound like something you have the stomach for, I totally respect that. In any case, know who you are before you strap in to watch this one. But if you do choose to venture it, I think that you'll find that there is filmmaking and acting of a very, very high class here if you know where to look for it. The movie uses the same visual conceit as 1917 and Birdman, among other movies, where it's all done to look as though the movie is unfolding in one unbroken shot. And this is definitely one of the more triumphant attempts at that particular style that I've seen. From what I understand, the movie was actually shot over a course of about 4 days, with takes that ran about as long as an hour and a half in some cases. I mean, the idea of shooting and performing for that length of time without taking any kind of a breather, it just about makes me nauseous. But watching the movie, I'm very grateful that they went through all the sweat and tears to make it happen, because the long takes were very obviously not faked. And it's not like the actors ever disappear from the frame completely to make it easy to have a wipe or something like that. They are generally center frame the whole movie. So major respect to the cinematographer on this one. I really hope you got a raise after this. And in a movie that is wall to wall with very brave and very spotless performances, Stephanie Estes as the lead character Emily is standout excellent. She creates a presence that is unsettling and malevolent but always fascinating. She even reminded me a little bit at times of Annette Bening's character Carolyn in American Beauty, in the sense that you can see her desperately clinging to just the thinnest facade of normalcy and contentment. And meanwhile, anger and hostility and insecurity are all festering just below the surface and threatening to lash out of control at a second. And I think that's about all I can say at this point before I get into the spoilers that I wanted to discuss. Do note, if you're not planning on seeing the movie but you are going to watch the spoilers, I'm not so much summarizing what happens in the movie in the spoiler section as I am just commenting on things that stood out to me. So if you're looking for a full synopsis, fair warning, you're not going to get that here. I would still, in any case, highly recommend and encourage you to watch the movie before you view any spoilers on it, because it really is the kind of movie that you need to watch blank. I'll include a link to the YouTube rental in the description of this review. And without any more tap dancing, I think I'll just move right on to the spoilers. I think the first big moment that anyone is going to comment on here is probably the pie. I mean, we had hints up until then that something was not quite right with Emily, because when you see her leaving her job as a kindergarten teacher at the school, she resorts right away to coaching a kid on how to antagonize a minority member of the staff who works at the school as a janitor. And I was sort of wondering why. The idea of some sort of a racist agenda did kind of cross my mind a little bit, but I sort of brushed that aside the way I imagine a lot of people would when they were watching it the first time. And then when we followed her from the school to the mixer that she's having with these other ladies, the tinfoil comes off that cherry pie, and wow, to say that that makes you immediately reflect on everything you've just seen is a rather polite way of putting it, I think. There's a nice big swastika carved right into the top crust of the cherry pie, complete with cherry juice and flesh just oozing out of those cuts. It's the single least appetizing pie I have ever seen, and that includes the post-coitus American pie. And here I thought that the swastika had lost most of its power to like really shock people. I mean, it still isn't appropriate, but it's not like it's the kind of thing that, most people get, that put off by anymore. But I think because it's the last thing that you're sort of suspecting at that point, especially in this context, it feels that much more sort of gross and nauseating. And right away just underlines that point that these are the last people that you would expect to be delivering this kind of message and rhetoric, which is exactly why they're so scarily effective, because nobody suspects people like this of being closet racists in most cases. Sort of the same way that that guy Leo Sharp, the drug runner who inspired the Clint Eastwood movie The Mule, was so effective at his job, because most of us don't suspect that an elderly person is going to be up to anything like that. We watch them and we just assume that they're out for a drive and just kind of going around just being old farts without too much of a care in the world. And these fake smiling Pleasantville homemakers use their privilege and the presumptions that come with it as a psychological disguise while they're sowing the seeds of their real agenda. The way that you see these women start to open up as they all get a little bit more loose with their speech, and the rhetoric and all the heated emotions just start to snowball. It feels very reflective of the internet age mentality when it comes to research and evidence and justification, which basically boils down to, well, someone else supports my view and agrees with me, therefore, haha, evidence. And it's like watching idiot kids make up their own version of history or the Bible as they go or something like that. And it would merely be pathetic were it not for the fact that their privilege also gives them the means and the ability to be able to actually act some of this nonsense out. This feels akin to what you would get if, rather than simply allow your kids to watch Wile E. Coyote playing with dynamite in a Looney Tunes episode, you actually gave them lit sticks of dynamite, pushed them outside, and said, now go play. I mean, you just know something is going to bounce up in their face at some point, and that makes it even more tense on top of the fact that they are scarily comfortable with all the views that they're espousing. But it's when they have an encounter with the Asian siblings at the local mini-mart that one of the members of the group owns that they cross the line from espousing to enacting. And when we meet those two Asian siblings at the store, I really appreciated the fact that they chose to choreograph it with the two of them always very sort of vague, soft, distant from the camera for the most part. It means that they're quite diminished as characters, yes, but I think that that's the point. We know nothing about these two, and neither, for that matter, do these hateful women. But antagonize them they do, and it's around this point where one of the two Asian siblings does fight back a little bit and drops a truth bomb, as the kids say, about the character Emily's brother being in prison for attempted sexual assault. And was it actually attempted sexual assault of one of the two women that we see in the movie here? I sort of felt like that was supposed to be the idea and the point, and that is at least in part why Emily decides to zero in on these two. Plus, that early conversation that she had with her brother on the phone seems to suggest that she thinks that the charges were kind of bullshit anyway. And it would also, in terms of tracking things before the start of the movie, explain how Emily felt compelled to try and form this group. One more thing, along with her apparent inability to conceive children, that feed her defining insecurities about lack of control. And we see that character trait reach its most depraved point probably when we see Emily try to essentially bully her poor husband. Well, okay, maybe calling him poor is a bit of a stretch, but bullying her husband into helping her commit a hate crime against these two Asian siblings as the whole situation escalates. I mean, she just absolutely chastises him, berates him, emasculates him, all the while totally victimizing herself against all that in such a shameless way that I couldn't decide whether I wanted to applaud the actress or strangle the character more. And based on the moments that we get with her and her husband here, man, if that was not a marriage of convenience, I don't know what is. It's like Emily just drove half a block down that street in a small town and just spotted some guy working at a gas station and said, "Hey, you're white enough, let's get married." Fast forward a little bit more again, and these ladies all show up at the siblings' house, fully prepared to vandalize it and confiscate one of their passports if they can find it. But big surprise, the sisters come home and catch them in the act. And things become so frantic and cruel at this point that one of the sisters essentially ends up being force-fed peanuts and dying of an allergy that she couldn't tell anyone she even had because they kept her mouth clamped shut, while another is subsequently suffocated and then violated with a bottle. Ooh. In order to divert suspicion away from any women who could be suspects. Everyone's first presumption is that with a sexual assault at play, a male was responsible. Like I said, it's a lot to stomach. However, Araujo does have a little bit of mercy on us at the very end of the movie, where after they've dumped the bodies, you eventually see, I believe I want to say Lily. Yes, I think it's, yeah, the character Lily emerges from beneath the water, still alive, and we would presume on her way to call the authorities. And yeah, I hope that these women have some good lawyers in their little white nationalist pipeline, because they are going to need them. That does also bring me to my only sort of real criticism of the movie, and that's that while I did enjoy and appreciate the fact that one of those women did survive that ordeal, as harrowing as it was, the build up to that particular plot point felt a little bit off. Because after they load the bodies into the van and start driving down to the water, there's a long point where the shot focuses on the two bodies in the bag for such a long time that it actually feels a bit awkward. As an experienced viewer, my instincts told me that they were focusing on it for a reason, but then the shot was held for such a long time that my thoughts eventually abandoned that and just started sort of wondering, like, why are we staring at the bodies this long? Then when they actually dump the body in the water, there's a similar instance of focusing for a painfully long time on the rippling surface of the water before Anne eventually bursts through. And I'm sure that final pause was simply meant to be dramatic, and it's not that my interest was waning exactly, but again, it got held for such an overlong period of time that I started to wonder, like, okay, so are you trying to tell me that she is still alive, or that she might be, or are we eventually just going to fade into the credits? They tightened the length of those shots even just a little bit. It would have made that final reveal have more effect and punch for me. To be fair, when the central visual conceit of your movie is that it's one unbroken shot, that shooting style does make editing decidedly difficult, for the obvious reason that as soon as you cut, you've broken the shot. But both the shots I'm describing occur at points when the camera is relatively still, so I'll bet you could have edited, a good 10 or 15 seconds out of both those shots, and nobody, assuming that you made the dialogue where necessary transition smoothly, would be the wiser. I think you still could have done it, personally, but that's just me. The other thing I really liked about where we finally arrive at with these women when their crime has spiraled way out of control is that you start to realize that for all the bravado and tough talk that they gave early on in the movie, they're all essentially bluffers and cowards. They may know how to spout the rhetoric and get angry and puffed up when they're surrounded by people who are like-minded and are going to tell them exactly what they want to hear. But as much as they truly do believe this crap, for all their bravado, when it comes down to actually enforcing their ideology, they are very weak-stomached. They are poor criminals. They are just all around very poor and inept at handling themselves in tense situations. And that ultimately betrays insecurity rather than righteousness as the true emotional foundation of any of these sort of groups. And a movie that can make me this uncomfortable but still leave me with this much to ponder and appreciate has clearly done more than a few things right, so to everyone involved, I say bravo. Anyways, thanks for sticking all the way through on this one if you did. Obviously, the format was different from my usual reviews in more ways than one, but this was a movie that obliged me to change things up a bit if I was ever going to be able to talk about it coherently. I would also like to just quickly mention that if you did watch this movie and you enjoyed it, there's a movie that touches on some of the same notes, although it goes to a more satirical level than this one does, in my opinion. Directed by the Thornton brothers, called Cactus Jack. If you follow my channel at all, you know that JT and I both included it on our year-end best of lists. It's a terrific movie, and while I wouldn't necessarily recommend pairing it on the same evening as Soft and Quiet unless you want to have a very stressful night, it's another effective character study on how this kind of mentality can just really rot people from the inside out and turn them into needy, desperate, pathetic human beings. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Look for me to start producing content on a more regular basis again starting real soon here, and I will see you all next time.